Krista Caufman. I am the director of the McNair Scholars Program here. That's one of the paths through honors that we are funded through the U.S. Department of Education to work with students who are typically underrepresented in graduate school. So first generation students, students from underprivileged backgrounds, those sorts of things. And so so our students do research just like everybody else in the upper division honors, and then we have this extra emphasis on applying to graduate school. That's why I got pulled in to do this workshop. All right, so what I would love to know from you guys is I'd love to know your name, if you are considering a degree after college, kind of what that is. Are you thinking master's? Are you thinking law school? And about how far are you away from that application? Are you already in the application process? Are you thinking it's going to be a couple years before you apply? So if you could start.
My name's Brooke, and I want to go to law school, and I'm probably going to start applying next year.
Okay.
My name is Jonah. I also want to go to law school, and I looking at applying in a year and a half.
My name is Ryan. I'd like to go into a deeper music education field in graduate school, and I've not applied yet.
Okay. Okay.
I'm Riley. I want to get my PhD in history, and I'm probably going to start applying in the next 2 years.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Sid. I'm thinking of either doing an English master's degree or something in that, or I'm also an education person, so
Okay.
potentially like educational psychology.
Okay. So in that world. Cool. And I'm sorry, how far are you away from that?
I know that for like a lot of English specific master's degrees, they want a lot of writing. So I'm friendly to candidates.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, my name is Brenda. I'm planning on going master's in psychology,
Okay.
and I'll start looking this year for graduate schools and then applying.
By next year. Okay, so nobody's in the process of applying this fall. Right? Okay. That's good. Then I will slow down a little bit, or I can speak through some of the stuff that is more relevant to that. All right. I want to make sure that I cover what you need to know. So do you guys have specific topics or questions you want to make sure we get to?
I guess I'm curious on the underrepresented populations and what are those exactly?
So for McNair, and that's only within McNair, that's students who identify as Black or African American, Hispanic, Latinx, Native American, Native Alaska, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander.
I have a question about like LSAT, how someone can.
Okay. Okay, we'll touch a little bit on that. Anything else you guys need to know before you walk out the door? All right. I was noticing the TikTok word of the week as yapping, and this is sort of a yapping presentation. I have a ton of information to give at you. Please don't hesitate to raise your hand or slow me down if there's something that you would be clarified or you want answered in the moment. And I may skip through some things depending on how our time goes and what you guys are interested in. Okay, so quick little language thing. So graduate school encompasses a traditional master's program, which is usually a 1.5 to 3 year program that is academic. It's coursework. You may have a capstone or a thesis associated with it. It includes professional master's programs, which are also 1.5 to 2 years, and they are geared towards preparation for a more specific career. So if you're interested in going into counseling or social work or something like that, you might complete a master's degree in order to go into that career. And then any doctoral, PhD, EDD, those kinds of programs that are longer. So PhD in history could take up to 10 years, depending on the kind of research that you choose to do. Right. So, yeah. Other schools. So we have several people who are interested in professional schools. That would include law or medicine or business, those kinds of things, they tend to, again, be training for a specific career. They have a lot less emphasis on research, both in once you get there, as well as how much they weigh it during the application process. And there's usually a little bit less funding available for professional schools because you're getting trained to come out with a degree that will make you readily employable. So they kind of expect you to take out loans. Right. Here's a typical admissions timeline. If you are looking more on the kind of academic master's or PhD program, that's what I'm most prepared to talk about. I'll talk a little bit about law school and kind of how it differs. So during your junior year, you should be taking challenging courses. You should be preparing for those exams, whether that is the GRE, which is a common exam that people will take going into graduate programs, or the LSAT or the MCAT or any of those kinds of tests. You want to start preparing for those right now. And if you have the opportunity to participate in some independent research, that's kind of what you should be doing in your junior year. The summer after your junior year is when you should start to contact potential programs that you're interested in. So that's one way in which applying to graduate school is very, very different than applying to undergraduate. Undergraduate, you sort of chose your institution and applied there. In graduate school and academic graduate programs, you are kind of choosing the person that you want to work with, communicating with them, and then applying to wherever they happen to be. And so it's a lot different. You have to put a lot of effort into, therefore, identifying who you might be interested in working with. And then starting to update your CV, draft the personal statements and research statements, the essays that will be part of your application. And again, be involved in research if at all possible. By the fall of your senior year, you should be prepared to reach out to the people who are going to write letters of recommendation for you, be able to give them drafts of the statements that you've prepared so that they can use those as they write their letters on your behalf. You start to finalize your application material and start to apply. There will be, deadlines are creeping up. There are more and more that are in December now. They used to be predominantly sort of January window, but they're scooting to the before winter break time. So you may need to have applications in sometime in November, December. There are also plenty that roll over into the spring. Okay, so in the spring, you're going to be sitting around waiting. So it's in some ways the most stressful part of it. Depending on your program, you may have to do an interview. You may have to schedule those. More of those, again, are happening online in Zoom, kind of post-COVID. They figured out that works well enough. But others, they want you to interact in front of them with potential colleagues. So you may need to travel someplace. Even if you are not invited for an interview, it might be really important to try to make a campus visit. I try to encourage everybody to set foot on campus before they commit to a school, because you gotta make sure the vibe is right. You know, that if you get there and feel really uncomfortable, you're probably not gonna stay and be successful. So before you invest so much into, a place for multiple years, try to get out and visit it. I've had a number of people change their minds, that on paper, it looked like they really wanted to go here, but once they visited, they're like, right? And then you gotta make a decision. So that's kind of the timeline. Questions? Pretty sure law school timeline works about the same. That you should be getting your applications together in the fall.
A little earlier.
A little bit earlier.
Early decision opens in August.
In August? Okay, so it's much more like the medical cycle. And so that's also, nobody's doing that, but med school also does that, where applications are pretty much due in the summertime. So you scoop everything up 6 months.
Krista.
Yeah.
So are there some graduate schools that have rolling application into the spring?
There are some graduate programs that have both late spring deadlines as well as rolling. So rolling application means that they will accept you until the class is full. And so there's no specific deadline. Earlier you can apply to those kinds of things, the better. But there are schools that will accept people clear into summer before the start date in the fall.
Is it true that, is that more true for masters rather than PhD?
A little bit more true for masters and for some of the professional degrees. So, okay. So what should you be looking for in a graduate program? What do you think is important?
And not overload credits.
Okay.
Something that's more geared towards what you want. Oh, this is a popular school and it's really good, so you should go here instead of a school that's probably focused on what you need.
Yeah. A fit piece.
Probably like looking at the faculty members and seeing what kind of research they're doing.
Mhm.
So if you know that that's maybe the research that you would want to help with.
Exactly. So all of that kind of put into a fit category of, do you have people there that you can work with, be successful, do stuff that you're interested in? So basic kinds of things, that strong connection to a research advisor in your area of interest. So yeah, in history, if you are interested in Renaissance history and they specialize in early American, it's not going to be at all a good fit. So then there are other factors that relate to fit that may have to do with both the match, your ability to get in and be successful, like the people that you are in class with. Make sure that the school of thought or the politics or those kinds of things are consistent with a place where you're going to thrive. It matters whether you're going to get financial support while you are there. For academic programs, often the language is they should pay you to be going to graduate school, especially for a PhD. It's less often to see that at the master's level, and like I said, very rare in the professional schools. But you want to know what kind of financial support you're going to get and how long that's going to last, sort of thing. Increasingly, it's important to make sure that it's a kind of healthy academic student environment. You may end up a place that is highly competitive, which may be fine for you. Maybe you thrive in that kind of environment, but if you don't, you want to know that in advance and choose someplace that's maybe a little bit more collaborative. You want to know, what the expectations for, say, work and publication are. Often you'll be working with a faculty member on their research, perhaps for a while, and you may be contracted to work 20 hours a week, but the expectation may be more like 75. So you want to know that before you get there. How much time are you going to need to be in the lab? And then particularly if you're thinking of going into teaching, you might want to pay attention to what the rankings are of schools. There's no definitive set of ranking out there, and it's all dependent on the department and not the school in general. But that can give you some leverage depending on what you want to do next. For a lot of people, it's really not that important to kind of know whether it's precisely a tier 1 or a tier 2 school. Okay. I typically recommend that people apply to 6 or 8 schools. Often the recommendations I'm seeing among McNair directors right now is 10 to 12. It's really, really expensive. I just heard a faculty member recommend, you only need to do 4. So I think it's really, again, field dependent, department dependent. If you are going into a field like philosophy, where they're only going to accept 1 or 2 people in a program each year, and there may be only 8 of them that you're interested across the country, you're going to apply to all 8. So, but in others, if you are looking more at a master's in counseling, perhaps, or a master's in a classic discipline where there are lots and lots of them, you may be able to target a little more carefully. But I talk about it in terms of kind of 3 levels. You want to have a couple foundation schools that you're pretty confident that you can get into. Pretty sure you'd be happy enough there, and that you can probably figure out how to pay for. And so those might include an in-state school, something like that. Then you want to have some in the middle that are kind of good matches of where you might need just a couple things to kind of fall in place. It's maybe potentially a little bit more expensive, and so you're going to need to have a better financial aid package, or it's really going to depend on whether you have the opportunity to work with the person that you want to. And then you have some at the top of your pyramid. And this is kind of where you can vary, but you want to have some stretches, some dream schools, those sorts of things, because you will not get in if you don't apply. And sometimes there's a whole bunch of programs out there that are just lottery programs that they get hundreds of applications, all of whom are probably qualified. Really hard to know how they're making the decision. And so it really just feels kind of like a lottery sometimes. And so you got to put your name in and see if it comes up. All right, talk a little bit about how to make yourself an attractive applicant. So again, what do you think schools are looking for from you?
Research experience.
Especially if you are going down a research path, having some experience in that process is valuable.
Variety of softs. Like soft skills, other experience, volunteer work, stuff like that.
I think that can be more important in law school than it is actually sometimes in academic world, that they tend to put a lot more emphasis on, do you have research skills? Are you passionate about a topic? And less on, can you communicate, engage in your community, that sort of thing. So, and again, it's going to depend a little bit on the kind of law that you might be interested in. Yeah.
Good grades.
Good grades. Yes, good grades typically matter. Every now and then we'll encounter people who are, I think of them as very angular. So a lot of honor students are well-rounded. You're kind of good at a lot of things. But sometimes they are looking for angular people who may be really, really good at one thing and not awesome at a bunch of other things. And so it may be that you have good grades in your field and not as good grades as you would expect in some other fields. You could still be eligible for graduate school under those circumstances. So, and they're mostly looking at the last 60 credits or so, the last couple years that you're in college, to give you a break if you got off to kind of a rough start. And they want to know when you're in your major classes primarily. They may, in fact, be more interested, as I said, in your GPA, in your major than they are in your overall GPA.
Do you report your major and junior, senior GPA to grad schools?
Most places, they're going to ask for what your major is. They're going to ask for what your GPA is. And if your GPA is not where you want it to be, there are ways to address that in your personal statement to also kind of reframe things so that, again, if you look at the last X number of credits that I've done, I actually have a 4.0, or, if you're looking in my major, my GPA is really a 3.9, ignore that other number in there.
For graduate schools that have an option GRE, they're looking for like either a good GPA or a high GRE, right?
GREs are tricky. So the GRE, the graduate record exam, like I said, is required for a lot of graduate programs, far fewer now than again pre-COVID, but a lot of programs discovered that they could populate a good class without having that piece of information, which is good because that test doesn't actually measure your ability to be successful in graduate school or anything relevant. And so it really has always just kind of been a hurdle that you needed to get past. Some programs will use a test score as a threshold. You must have this score or we aren't even going to look at your application. Others may use it as a balancing factor within of like, oh, look, this person tests really well, but doesn't have good grades, or the opposite. This person has really good grades, even though their test score doesn't maybe line up with what their grades are. They're doing a more holistic review. And some of them are using it as a way to narrow down their pools. Like, okay, we, have gotten down to the last 50 applications. We can only accept 20 people. Now we're gonna look for itty bitty differences. Does that answer? Okay,
So is the GRE just like the college version of the SAT?
kind of.
Yeah.
So the GRE they just changed it, which is nice. It used to be a 4.5 hour, 5 hour test, and it's now down to a 2 hour test because they cut it in half. And so you only have to write one essay now, which is a pretty standard, here's a statement, make an argument about it. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? And then there's a verbal section, which is a whole lot of vocabulary. So it's either vocabulary in context, or it's, take a pair of words and try and make this sentence mean the same thing using different sets of words, or there's some reading comprehension. And then there's a quantitative reasoning test. So it is designed to be focused on reasoning and not just your ability to solve math problems. So it actually has lower math requirements than the ACT. There's no trig on it. It's algebra and geometry, a little bit of statistics. But it's multi-step problems. It's peculiar. You want to take a look at the kinds of questions that you're going to encounter before you walk in. LSAT has a whole different set of kinds of questions. You get to do the logic problems, which are actually really fun. And so make sure that you know what the most up-to-date version of your test is. Don't just necessarily pull out, your sibling's old test booklet and assume that things are going to be the same. You'll be very surprised.
So you just mentioned about, it's good to know what's inside the booklet. How do we,
So you can go to, for the GRE, it's ets.org, which is Educational Testing Systems. I think ETS. And you can get 2 free practice tests there. You can buy materials that they create to help you prepare for the test. There's a ton of stuff that's online, free and available, so you can prep if that's a way that you prefer. The tests are all online now, as opposed to being paper and pencil. And so it's good to practice them as online tests and not just practice in books.
Right.
Works a little bit different.
are they gonna be in classrooms, or is it just like you take your tests, like you're in a comfortable space?
Again, now it's different that you'll sign up. The places that you can take the GRE that are kind of local, you can take it at CSU, you can take it at a testing center down in Longmont. And then other than that, it's Denver, Laramie.
But it's still on the
kinds of things.
computer?
It's on the computer. Some of them are small, like the ones at CSU. It was used to be kind of cubicles. You weren't in a room with a lot of other people doing it. It was just kind of you taking your test. The testing centers, it's not going to be everybody in the room taking the same test. So you may be in there taking the GRE and somebody else is in there taking a praxis test. And so they may be finishing at a completely different time or having breaks at a different time, or starting and stopping different times. And so in that way, it's kind of different from the standardized testing you may have had.
So, sorry.
That's okay.
So you just talked about the practice. I'm going back to the attractive applicant thing. Would it be like a good idea if you got like a really good grade on the practice, or you like add it to your area?
That could be something that you highlight on your CV. Your CV is a curriculum vitae. It's an academic resume. It's the course of your life. You put all of your academic kinds of activities on it, and they care a little bit less again about jobs you had to pay the bills, that were unrelated to what you want to go into. And again, depending on who you talk to, how much you should include about extracurricular activities and that sort of thing. And there are places on your CV where you could highlight courses that you've taken, certificates that you've earned, and that could be a place where, again, you highlight perhaps a score or a GPA.
Great, thank you.
Do you know if subject-specific GREs are still okay?
Yes, there are still, again, they've cut down on those. I think they dropped this, but you still have to, there's a math subject test, where they actually do want you to solve complex problems. And they don't care that much about the general test because they really want to know what your mathematical knowledge is. But it's down to a very limited number, and the application process is pretty clear if you would need to take a subject test in your area. Grad schools are, again, looking for prior research experience, and especially if you have the opportunity to do publications and or presentations about it. And again, this is one way that you can set yourself apart in the law school application process, is that is not an experience that many will have had. They may have written a senior thesis. That'll be pretty common in law school. But if you've really initiated research, worked on a research team, something like that, you can really set yourself apart.
Yeah, like our capstone having like legal research case, that would work.
That would be helpful if you could say, you know, hey, I'm already delving into the kinds of issues that I'm looking forward to exploring in law school.
So you just meant like make a case that I actually.
So, well, because legal research is a very precise sort of thing, and you may or may not be able to find the kind of support that you need here to do that kind of legal research, but to do something that is law or policy related is going to be close enough.
So concerning presentations,
Mhm.
would they be looking for something like much bigger than maybe say the fall symposium or the research day at UNC?
There will be stages of those to have presented campus wide. So if you got out of the classroom, you know, not just doing a classroom presentation, but did something campus wide, that's going to be sort of first tier. If you went off to a regional conference, whether that is an undergraduate research conference or a discipline research conference like the Rocky Mountain Psychological Association or something like that. And then there would be national kinds of conferences that you could present at. There's a national honors conference that you might be able to apply for and present at. Okay, so, and again, if you're working someplace, getting a publication, or even considering trying to publish your capstone project, we have Ursa Day on campus, which is the undergraduate research journal here. You can submit your writing, whether it's your capstone or if you just happen to have a really good paper that you wrote one time for class, or you know, something that you did that you're proud of and wanted to submit for consideration. You can start to get publications like that. Okay. They are looking for your potential to contribute to the field. They are picking their future colleagues. Okay, so they are looking at like, would we want to have you as a colleague in the future? Like, do you show the potential that you're going to contribute something, that you're going to move the field forward? As you said, you're looking at your academic performance and your academic preparation. That doesn't mean that you have to stay in a discipline that you started in, you know, so if you started in political science and end up wanting to go to graduate school in gender studies, that would be just fine. You know, that you do not have to stay in your undergraduate major. You can jump. And then again, looking for evidence of creativity, persistence, diligence, motivation, those kinds of soft qualities. All right, so to do that, make sure you're choosing your courses so that you are meeting any prereqs that there might be in your field. Make sure that you are doing well in your classes. Get involved in research when you can. And probably one of the most key things that people don't realize is you need to actually get to know your professors. Okay, not just it's their lecture or whatever it is that they do and then go away, and you only ever go talk to them if you have a question about grade or you don't understand something. That is not the level at which you need to know your professors. you need to just stop by their offices during office hours sometimes and get to know them, let them get to know you, talk a little bit about what your dreams and plans are, what you're thinking about doing, get advice from them, hear their stories about, well, tell me about your graduate school experience, or why did you choose to do this? Because that's how you get good letters of recommendation, is when they know you better than just, yes, they were in my class, they attended frequently, they got a decent grade. That letter will hurt you. Okay? They need to be able to speak about you personally, which means you got to make that extra effort. All right, opportunities for doing undergraduate research through this, but there's funding through our Office of Undergraduate Research here at UNC. There are summer opportunities to do research that may get you off campus, may actually get you a nice stipend. We had a student who I think got paid about $6,000 this summer to do research, plus travel, plus moving forward and that sort of thing. So study abroad, those kinds of things that might give you insight, breadth, a way to stand out a little bit during the application process. And then, of course, you're in the honors program, so you'll have the opportunity to do a capstone. If you are eligible for McNair, you can jump tracks and join us.
What is
McNair is the program that I run. So it's the Ronald E. McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program. And it is a program specifically designed to help students from disadvantaged backgrounds who want to go into graduate school. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about crafting your application. Most applications have these pieces, okay? They're going to be forms because they're applications. So almost everything's online now, so that's nice. It makes it a lot easier. You are going to have some kind of writing that you have to do. That may be short, that may be long. It's going to vary by program and by discipline, but you're going to have to write a little bit about why you want to go to graduate school or law school. They're going to want your undergraduate transcripts, and that's transcripts from anywhere that you got undergraduate credit. So if you got, dual enrollment credit that has counted towards your 120 credits here at UNC, you're going to have to get transcripts from those.
What is the school closed down?
There's probably a mechanism that either through what's called the Student Clearinghouse, which is a national repository, you may be able to get some of that information. Otherwise, put a note in and explain. Okay, this is no longer available to me.
So I just want to confirm, so dual enrollment from say high school, you want to put those things in there too?
Because that's counting as college credit for you, you will have to include it. So, all right, so you'll have to get transcripts. You may need test scores, depending on your field and what direction. We're seeing test scores coming back more, kind of post-COVID, and now with the changes in affirmative action policy and that sort of thing, they are looking for a variety of ways to make sure that they are getting a diverse pool. And then you're going to need letters of recommendation. That will vary depending on the application, but typically about 3. All right, you may also, yeah.
About the letters of recommendation.
Mhm.
If I'm applying to 4 to 12 schools, I ask my professor to write one letter and then it goes
Yes.
to each of those. Okay.
That's what is actually expected. So professors know that it's part of their job to write letters of recommendation. Okay, that's built into the system. And they know that they are going to write multiple ones. And so the first one is the hard one. Okay, that's the one that takes all of the effort to figure out what you want to say. Subsequent letters where you just do a little bit of customizing, a little bit of tinkering, don't take nearly as much time. So it is actually better to pick your sort of targeted few and ask them to write all than spreading the pain among extra people. Utilitarian, that would be best. Yeah.
So inform your people who are writing your letters of recommendation, all of the schools that you are applying to.
Yes, or at least a target number, because we
Okay.
want you to be in communication about this point in the semester. Because you want to be on the front end of their pile, not the back end of their pile. 'Cause they will spend a little bit more time on your letter if you ask early than if you are part of the crowd that asks at the last minute. So you should tell them, like, here's my preliminary list. I may add a couple schools if you're at that stage, or if it's like, I know, I'm aiming for 8 to 10 schools. Here's the first round of what I have. Any of that is an okay way to let them.
What's the minimum time you should expect them to have?
That's gonna vary a little bit by professor and what your relationship is with them. I would say you want to give them at least a month before you need anything. Occasionally you'll get somebody who can turn it around in a couple weeks. Do not expect them to turn it around in a lot less time than that, unless, like I said, you have a very strong relationship with them and it's some sort of really special opportunity, that you just learned about, as opposed to, oh, I just added one, school or something. You gotta give them time. Those letters take hours. to actually compose.
So I know in like high school, the letters of recommendation went straight to the school. In college, does the letters go straight to the school, or do they come back to us and then we send them to the school?
Now, because everything is pretty much done electronically, when you submit your application, you will enter the names of your recommenders and their emails. And then that will send an email link to them with instructions about how to submit. So sometimes it's a form and a paragraph that you're supposed to write. Sometimes it's just a big box of like, please upload a document, that kind of thing. Again, you want to make sure that they know you want them to write letters of recommendation before they start receiving these links from schools. That's, very bad form for them to just start getting emails from schools. Okay. So as you mentioned, if you're going into English, going into history, a lot of the humanities programs, you're going to need to have a really robust writing sample. That is definitely above and beyond something that you just turned in for class. To have revised it multiple times, worked with a faculty member to make sure that it's as polished as possible, because that's you demonstrating that you are capable of doing graduate level. Okay. They will usually have guidelines about how long it can be. They're often around 25-ish pages. So you're not turning in a 6-page paper for this sort of thing. You're turning in a major term paper. If you are going into some of the creative arts, you may also have. And then, as I said, some fields will require interviews. Some schools may offer you interviews or offer you interviews tied to funding opportunities. And so you may need to go out and interview in a lab or with the professor that you are interested in working with. In STEM fields, most of the time, those expenses are all covered. In humanities and social science, not as frequently. Sometimes you have to come up with that money. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit faster through this section since nobody's writing right now. I just want you to be aware of different kinds of things that you may need to include. There's a lot of confusing language about your statement of purpose or your personal statement or whatever it is that you are submitting. So sometimes they are called a statement of purpose. Sometimes they're called a research statement. Sometimes they're called a letter of intent. Sometimes they're called a personal statement. Sometimes they're called an autobiography. Sometimes there's a diversity statement. Sometimes there's just a whole bunch of short answers and no actual big document that you submit. So you're going to have to get into the actual application before you even know what's going to be asked of you. Sometimes there are very specific questions that they want you to address in this statement. And sometimes it's like, please upload a statement's 3 to 5 pages. So you have to kind of wing it on your own. I'm going to walk through a little bit of the differences, keeping in mind that not all schools stick to this nomenclature. Some of them just use all of the terms interchangeably. So again, the most important part of this is follow the directions. Whatever it is that they asked for, make sure that that's what you give them. So if they've asked you to address, 3 specific questions, don't just upload your general statement that you wrote for other schools. That's one good way to be bumped out of the pool. Okay. So a statement of purpose or research statement, most common in academia, especially for PhD programs, that's very future oriented. What do you want to study and who do you want to work with when you get here? So that's the future one. That's a place where you're going to highlight your research and relevant experiences to show why you're going to be successful when you get there. That's why you've done research. That's why you're including a writing sample. That's why you've done some of the jobs or volunteer experiences that you have. This has helped me build a set of skills and knowledge that are going to help me be successful when I get to graduate school. Okay. Personal statement is more encompassing. Sometimes it will include part of that research piece, but it's a little bit more of your story. Why are you motivated to go on to graduate school? How do you develop your interest in this field or this area? What kinds of things or challenges have you overcome in your way to getting to this next step? Maybe a little bit of what do you want to do in the future? That kind of stuff. So, make sure again that you are reading what the directions are on that. All right, diversity statements. Still show up, are restricted depending upon the state in which you might be applying, because there are some states that do not allow you to use this language at all. There are other areas that are still trying to figure out how to ask some of these questions in ways that don't infringe on the recent affirmative action ruling from the Supreme Court. So it may be a statement of your own values related to this. It may be examples of some experiences that you have had around DEI kinds of stuff. It may be, again, what your goals are, ways that you plan to incorporate this in your future practice. One of the things that can be really important there is to go in and read, whether it's the departmental mission statement, the institutional mission statement, value statement. They're going to have a statement, a formal statement somewhere. And if you can echo some of that language back to them, that can be a way, again, to show that you've done your research and you see that the department is really committed to X, Y, Z, and here's what you have done along those lines. So, and again, sometimes that's folded into all of the rest of this. So the major tips that I want to give you are be as specific as possible. When you are talking about research that you want to do, the more you can get to the actual research question you might be interested in pursuing, beyond a period or a region or something like that. It's like, I'm actually interested in maybe using this lens in order to understand this phenomenon. There's a little balancing there, because you don't want to be so specialized that they might say, we don't have anybody who can support you in that kind of project, but you need to be specific enough to the point of name dropping sometimes of, I want to work with these 3 people.
So if there's not anyone at this like graduate school that you can work with your idea of a project, will they just, is that the less chance that you will get in?
Yeah, they may decide. And so that's why you should take rejections very personally, because sometimes it's precisely that. We don't have anybody here who can support you in what you want to do. It's not a good fit. So it's not about whether or not you could do the work. It's just that they don't have anybody who could support you. Or the person who could support you is going to be on sabbatical next year and isn't taking on any new students. And you, it's bad. Again, you always get this advice about writing, but it's so important in your graduate statements. Is you got to provide some evidence and examples. You can't just claim to be, I'm a leader and move on. You got to demonstrate what have you done that has helped you develop leadership skills. What you're going to write a lot of drafts. And these are, I think, the hardest things in the entire world to write, because you have to figure out how to brag about yourself without sounding cocky. And you got to reveal just the right level of personal kinds of experience without becoming a sob story or so. You're going to write a lot of drafts. I tell people, most people take 8 to 10 drafts. Right? Which is why I had to start early, starting the summer. Your friends who apply to graduate school and don't start until Thanksgiving break are gonna hate this, you know, because along with that, writing lots of drafts, that means that you're showing it to lots of people. You don't know who's going to be on the committee and how they're going to react to certain things. So you want to show your statement to a variety of different kinds of people. Some folks who know you well and, you know, get feedback of like, do you think this accurately describes me? Is there anything that I'm missing from this? Some people who don't know you well and ask them of like, well, what do you know about me now that you've read this? You know, and make sure that that lines up with what you want them to know about you. Okay. So it's not so much having people edit it and, you know, argue with you about word choice or something like that. It's really what's the impression that they have of you after reading these statements, so that you can try to make sure that you are showing up the way you want to show up. Once upon a time, when they used to do this with a lot of paper applications, when everybody had a folder of the application that they read, and they literally would put a sticky note on it with like 3 adjectives or 3 notes about who is the person in this file. Think very carefully about what you would want those three notes to be about you. Okay. And then again, critical in this process, have to customize it, which is part of why it takes so long. In most cases, you cannot write just one statement and send it to all of your schools. You're going to have to tweak it and talk about what's special about this program. Like they have an emphasis in this, and will give me an opportunity to work with, you know, Professor XYZ, or here's an opportunity where I would get to do my clinical work in this sort of a setting, or, you know, that I would have an opportunity to work with this population because you guys specialize or you are located and have relationships with community organizations that do XYZ. And so there are some settings, so med school in particular, and applying like to be an SLP, and so some of those other things actually go through a centralized application process. And so you upload all of your material to this centralized place and pick your schools, and they send it all out. So it works kind of like the Common Application, if you were familiar with that online. Okay. In that case, you don't get to customize. So you got to be really articulate about yourself, and usually there's a pattern to the schools that you have selected anyway, and so you can kind of line up, I'm interested in this sort of thing, and all of you would be interested. Right? I'm not sure how law schools are doing it anymore. I think that they're still much more than they directly to the school. Mhm,
You send it to LSAC,
Mhm.
also later council,
mhm,
and they submit their credential assembling service,
Mhm.
and they send that.
uh-huh.
But your, like, each school you write,
You
almost.
also have to
equals
write
like
a
YX
Mhm,
on top of a personal
Mhm.
statement.
yes. Yeah, and so that's what happens with some of the others is that you have this sort of general package and then you have supplemental materials that you have to submit, which is the why us argument in every case. Yep. For every school you send it to? Yeah. Mhm,
Just for a transcripts, that's not counting the actual assembly service.
mhm.
I'm fighting them about a fee waiver right now.
Yeah, and if you do need fee waivers, you can start long time in advance, whether that is for testing service or credentialing service or something like that, that they are. ETS is very resistant to giving any sort of accommodations.
Based off of parents' income, if you're under 25 still.
Typically, so unless you are emancipated from them, you are going to be considered during the application process, just as you were as a college student. The moment that you graduate, you become independent. So if you are putting off graduate school for a year, taking a gap year or something like that, you will then be applying as an independent student and you're broke and have no resources. I've just been out of school for a little bit.
So don't take a gap year.
Gap years are really tricky. For some people, they're very valuable. It depends on what you're doing during your gap year. For other people, the loss of momentum during that time can be really hard to overcome. You know, going back to school and back to homework and back to having no income is a whole lot harder than just staying in the groove. Letters of recommendation, we talked a little bit about choosing the right people to write your letters. And one of the ways to do this is to literally, when you ask them, probably ask them in person because you want to read their body language a little bit. And for this kind of activity is sort of a courtesy rather than just dashing off an email to them. But you want to ask them, would you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter of recommendation? Not just any old letter of recommendation. Can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? This gives them an easy out. If they are like, I don't have time, I don't feel like I know you well enough to write a really strong letter. I could write you a letter, but it wasn't going to be strong. And if there's any hesitation on their part, thank them very much for what they contributed to your education and move on to somebody else. Because a lukewarm kind of letter of recommendation, it can really hurt you. Again, if you're applying in the academic world, you want most of those to come from people who can speak to your academic ability, your academic potential. So if you've had a research advisor, they're usually looking for a letter from that person. Maybe you have somebody else that you've connected with, you've had a couple classes with them, and you've gone in and talked to them during office hours, so they can kind of speak a little bit to you as student. And then that third letter can come from some other kinds of places.
What do you think about like a grad student assistant writing a letter versus someone with a PhD?
A PhD is always going, well, it's not always going to be better. In most cases, if the PhD knows you well enough to write a strong letter of recommendation, then you want the credentials at the end of their name. Academics care about those sorts of things, and they will pay attention. So a graduate student, you know, is not awesome, but they may be better able to speak to you because if they have been, say, the person who did all of the supervision in the lab, and so they actually worked with you quite closely, they might even be able to write a better letter than whoever the faculty member is, who only saw you once every couple of weeks in a team meeting. So you want to kind of look at those elements. You certainly wouldn't want to have multiple letters from graduate assistants. A letter might be okay. All right. You want to give them information to help them write strong letters. And so those drafts of those statements, your CV, maybe your transcript, maybe the abstract from your research that you're doing, if they're unfamiliar with what your project is, some of those kinds of things. Very important to thank them for this. And they actually do want to know where you get in. And so that's one of the things I hear from faculty that most wrote all of these letters and then they disappeared and I don't know where they went, if they got in anywhere. So check back in with them, let them know what it is that you're doing. And if you are going to take some time away and not apply immediately, or even if you are going to apply during your senior year, but you're thinking of using somebody who taught you as a sophomore as a letter writer, you need to be staying in touch with them. So if you leave campus and are going to be out for a year or 2 years before you apply, you actually need to contact those letter writers and keep them updated on what you're doing. Here's what the plan is. It doesn't have to be some long letter. It can be a paragraph email. I just wanted to stay in touch. Here's the plan. I'm doing this and it's going well. And how are you doing? Ask them to get something personal because you want to stay in the front of their brain, and they're going to have a lot more students come through and you want them to still be able to write a strong letter. So I sometimes even encourage people, if you know you're going to take a gap year, still ask them to write letters of recommendation, or that tell them that you're going to ask them before you leave, because they might write it in that moment and then update it when you actually are going to apply. And they don't have to reconstruct who was this person and what was their project. You can get some help around campus for doing this. The most important people you should be talking to are your faculty and your advisors. Okay, these are the people who are in your field. They know best what's expected. If you want to go on in that field, they will have the most customized knowledge. The further away you get from that discipline, the more generic the advice is going to be that you get. Okay, so you can go to the Center for Career Readiness or the Writing Center to get feedback on some of these documents. And again, they may trust your faculty feedback more than you trust feedback from the Career Center or the Writing Center, because they're gonna give you, they may want you to have maybe a more flowery, a bigger hook for your research statement. And in your discipline, maybe they don't, just tell me what you want to study. I don't want to know anything else, but just tell me the facts. If you need some help developing the language about what you want to study, you can always check in with the Research Consulting Lab. They are great resources. And actually, the folks in the graduate school here at UNC are happy to help you understand the graduate process, give you feedback on statements and that sort of thing, that they really do see themselves as coaches to help people get into graduate school, not just UNC graduate school. So they come and present for us all the time and reinforce that message. So there are folks out there. Gonna skip a little bit of what happens to your application because that's very dependent upon your discipline. Talk a little bit about the costs of applying. So most of you are a little ways away. You should start a savings account applying to graduate school. Okay, because every application is going to cost somewhere between $50 and $150. Your transcripts are going to be $10 to $15 each. There's some ways that you can get around that, but it's going to cost you. You're going to have to pay the registration fee for your test, and then you'll usually get a few schools that you can send it to for free as part of that registration. But right now it's like $27 for every subsequent school that you want to send your GRE score to. If you need to go out and visit, that can be costly if you're flying across the country, especially on late notice or something like that. So you want to have a little bit of money stashed for that. And then moving to graduate school and getting started has a set of expenses there too, because because you may be moving across the country and trying to decide, am I hauling stuff with me or buying stuff when I get there, and getting your cable and your internet and, everything set up. And then often as a student, even if you have funding from the school, they're not going to fund you until after the drop date. And so you may not get any money from the school until a month into the semester, which. Yeah. Last couple things. There are ways to have your graduate school paid for, and you should be looking for those kinds of opportunities. They are mostly assistantships where you are either doing research for somebody or doing teaching in the program as service. So like that English 123 graduate students are getting their tuition paid and they're getting a stipend paid in order to teach those classes. So that's what you're looking for when you go to graduate school, is somebody who's going to pay your tuition and pay you some money on top of that. Okay. There are also scholarship kinds of opportunities that are out there. They are harder to find. You have to dig a little bit, and they also often require a proposal or something like that of like, here's what I intend to do in graduate school. This is why you should fund me. But those are great if you land a fellowship, because now you have money that you are bringing with you, and you are now a very attractive applicant because they don't have to come up with any money to pay for you because you're bringing your money in. Okay. Talked a little bit about LinkedIn, and here's your password that you need in order to get your points. We are just after 1:30. I'm happy to stay and answer questions, but I also recognize that maybe you have places to go. So